Welcome to Systems for Success. Many people think success is something that just happens to you if you're lucky or work hard enough. We believe that behind every success is a system in action. My name is Lonnie Ginger. Thanks for joining me and my family as we share real-life stories and learnings that might just help you design the life of your dreams. I want to, first of all, just congratulate you for taking the time out of your busy schedule during this crazy time to pause from the intensity of doing business and doing life to take some time to reflect on what could be one of the most important questions any of us can ask ourselves right now. These are certainly unprecedented times that we live in today, and no matter how smart you are, no matter how experienced you are, no one has experienced the likes of what society is experiencing right now. If someone had been through this before, I think the question we'd all be asking them is, what did you learn from going through a global crisis like this that could help us now? But the reality is, there's no historic precedence for much of what we're experiencing now. So since that's the case, the key question that we should be asking ourselves now, I think, is this. The question is, what lessons, what principles, what patterns can we learn from the past that will help us to adapt to this new world and serve others in this new world and succeed in this new world that we're entering into right now? So here at the beginning, this question flashed on the screen of my mind when I was talking to my personal coach a couple of weeks ago. And I was sharing some of the unique business challenges that we're having right now, maybe kind of complaining, in all honesty. And my coach wisely asked me the simple question. He said, I imagine you had some big challenges during the Great Recession, right? And then he said, I'm sure that you learned something from that. And I said, yeah, it was like a near-death experience, but this is so different now. And then he asked me this question. He said, what lessons, what principles, what processes did you learn from the challenges you faced during the Great Recession that will serve you well now? And honestly, my mind immediately went to thinking about how things are so different now than what caused the Great Recession. But he just kept saying, what did you learn that could serve you well now? And finally, when I got past my excuses for how this is different, the first thing that came to my mind was this, that even though our business plans got completely derailed from the Great Recession and the economic crisis that resulted, we ultimately ended up working through all the issues and actually became stronger than ever on the other side of the recession. And I think, as I was describing it to him, it's primarily by persistence in really keeping our eye on the ball of the fundamentals of what creates investment success, and keeping our eye on building strong relationships and doing the right thing regardless of the personal or corporate cost. As a result, we actually became stronger, and our average IRR on all of our real estate investments became higher than in any time in the last 28, 29 years of history, way exceeding industry averages. And my coach, as we were talking about, he gave me some wise advice. He just said, okay, take some of those same learnings and apply those to take the long view of what you're facing today. And just that one nudge to apply some learnings from the past has helped me, helped our team, helped my family to be more strategic and I think more optimistic than ever about the future that we have ahead of us now. So sometimes it takes someone outside of ourselves to point out how we can apply wisdom from the past to help us be more successful in the future. Today, we have the extraordinary opportunity to learn from the lessons of one of the most seasoned, successful entrepreneurs some of us may ever get to listen to. And specifically, how this brilliant leader is applying those lessons from the past to what he sees for the future of his businesses, his investments, and his family. So let me formally introduce our success talent for the day, Kevin McGovern. And Kevin is a good friend. He's the kind of guy that if you know him very long at all, you'd call him your friend too. I remember I saw Kevin walk through a crowded random restaurant in New York, and someone at just about every table he walked by jumped up and hugged him as if he was their bestie, like their best friend, right? That's just the kind of guy Kevin is. But beyond being a fantastic guy, Kevin is the chairman and founder of his single family office, McGovern Capital. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Kevin from our first interaction a few years ago on is that he and his family office focus on making a positive global impact through all of their investments. And he does this by creating or investing in trend-setting products and services or media platforms, things that really make a difference. I love Kevin's motto. Kevin's motto is catch the current, make the wave. I mean, his track record certainly reflects that this is more than just a motto for Kevin, and more on that later. But Kevin is the founder of the fastest growing beverage brand ever, SoBe. You may have heard of SoBe Water. He later sold it to Pepsi. His family office is a patent holder and responsible for the global rollout of the most successful skincare ingredient ever, alpha hydroxy acids. Kevin, is that why you still look so stinking young? Is that it?
No, I think the camera is doing me good because I am seasoned. I love that word seasoned. That means a little older.
Yes, but still acting young as ever, man. You can tell he's got a lot of energy. He's actually also one of the 3 owners of a company that produced the pure water filter for Procter & Gamble. And if you're around Kevin very long, you'll pick up on his clear passion for providing clean water around the world. So all in all, Kevin has been the founder or co-founder of over 25 companies, 6 of which became total global leaders in its category. So Kevin's got a lot of success under his belt, a lot to share with us today. He's also a highly impactful philanthropist as well. Only just name a couple of key organizations that your leadership and donations help fuel, Kevin, because if I named them all, it would take the rest of our time together. Kevin is a trustee emeritus at Cornell University. And I think if you walk around the Cornell campus, if you don't happen to bump into him when he's periodically appearing there as a guest teacher, you'll certainly find that you'll see the McGovern name on the campus. It's on the Life Sciences Incubator, the McGovern Fields, and the Business School. Tremendous contribution to Cornell. He's a national board member of the Smithsonian. He could talk for hours about that, fascinating things that he's discovered and continues to learn from around the world. He is vice chairman of an organization that provides scholarships to the families of police and firefighters who die in the line of duty in several states, etc. So you can tell Kevin is an impressive guy. And I think the most impressive thing I can say about you, Kevin, is that you're one of the most genuinely nice, friendly, helpful, successful, and seasoned business leaders that I know. And you just absolutely light up a room with your infectious smile and warmth. And I remember the first time I met you a few years ago, standing at, it was a buffet line at a conference, and you acted like you knew me. I think you make everybody feel that way. And you invited me to sit with you for lunch. And by the time we finished an hour or so of engaging conversation, I felt like I had a new best friend that I resonated with on so many levels of business and purpose and values. And back then I had no idea how super impressive your resume was, but I was super impressed by your zest for life, making a difference in the world, and just how you do everything in life. And that continues to impress me today. So with that introduction, Kevin, I know that some of our audience right now are thinking, wow, how did
I think we're
this
done.
guy
We're done.
get so much done in life, right? No, they're thinking, how did this guy get so much done in life? Like, I think it's this way with successful companies that people see when they flash up on the screen and in the magazines and on the billboards. Successful leaders like you are similar, where you start out with many years in obscurity and a lot of hard work, forming character, forming competencies, before you become what appears to many people as like a crazy overnight success. So I'm going to ask you to rewind the clock and talk a bit about your formative years and how you generated your motivation and confidence to make a difference.
We basically came from a modest background. Our dad was an Irish immigrant, and he owned a food store in Queens. He passed away when I was 11, and my mother had some bad lung issues. So I learned to provide for the family at the early age of 12 and 13. And so basically, I was not given any special spoons or anything like that. It doesn't matter if you are, and whatever you do with it. But, I just worked hard and got a scholarship to Cornell. And that changed my life. I tell young people, go to a good school and it'll give you, flexibility for the rest of your life and do well in academics, et cetera. My first year, I didn't do so well because it was like getting away. I had worked, 3 jobs in high school. So I had to make adaptations, et cetera, like a good entrepreneur. I finished Cornell, went out, worked a couple of years, and then went to law school because I had always dreamed of going to law school, Lonnie, but I couldn't afford it. I didn't have the money. So, of course, being the crazy kid that I am, and I still am, I said, I'm still going to full-time law school and I'll find a way. So I applied to St. John's, and I remember crossing the Whitestone Bridge. I had just paid first semester tuition and I didn't have any more money. I was riding in a Plymouth Duster with 120,000 miles on it, and I'm going to full-time law school. But I found a way. I worked 57 hours a week and went full-time to law school. I'm very proud of that. And I'm really into the motto, catch a car and make the wave. But I also, you can achieve the impossible. You got to break it into possible steps. And that early life, and I will comment about my brother Jim and I, you know, here Irish and our brother Tom and sister Pat. But my father is all education, education, education. The classic immigrants' children. And Jim got his doctorate. I got my JD. We all went on to graduate degrees. And so it's the classic immigrant family, the discipline and effectiveness. So I owe a lot to my family, to my mother and father. You can achieve the impossible, just break it into possible steps. That's really the story of my early life, Lonnie.
So Kevin, talk a bit about that. I love your phrase there. You can achieve the impossible if you break it into possible steps.
Yep.
You obviously started doing that quite early in your career. I mean, even in high school. Where did that come from? Because most people have, you know, big dreams, and most people have dreams they'd love to accomplish, but to break it down into those achievable steps and then have the discipline to do that. Where did that come from for you?
Part of it was that I had red hair. Okay. I know that sounds silly, but, you know, having red hair sets up a challenging circumstance from birth. And believe me, I was called every name in the book as a kid. And partly because I was a little bit chubby. You know, I had to prove that I was as good as my peers and whatever. So I played a lot of sports. I was, you know, slow running around the bases, but I could hit that ball a mile. Long story short, I had certain inadequacies, and it built a stronger mind when I overcame them. And I really believe that's part of the entrepreneurial experience. You know, I know we're going to talk about it a little later. But people say, what's the highest quality of an entrepreneur? You know, persistence to me is a wussy word. That what it really is, the key word is moxie. You know, it's a little bit, forgive my pugilistic analogy, but when you get hit by a left hook, do you come back with a right cross or do you go down? Because truly in life, you've got to learn to fight back from adversity, because all of us have adversity almost every day. I tell people, you get bad news every day in some form or another, and you get good news. You thank God for both. You really do. So anyway, I don't want to give you a long, but I had some inadequacies, and you overcome them. And in doing so, you build some mental toughness, frankly.
Yeah. I mean, right there, that's a phenomenal lesson for what we're facing today. And your life, Kevin, is a testimony to the value of adversity, the value of inadequacy.
I remember being on a fire escape studying with a flashlight. So the favorite thing I do other than being with my family is talk to kids in the inner city. And I say to them, I know I look like, you know, blah, 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 but I've been there. I've been on that fire escape with a flashlight, and I understand it.
Wow.
And I understand the grit that you have to try to overcome it.
That's fantastic. So then, Kevin, after school, you went into business acquisitions and venture law, right, for several years. How did that experience help you grow into the business person you are today?
Basically, I built my own law firm, had about a dozen lawyers working for me, and we were a deal shop, just doing deals. Mergers and acquisitions is what it's called, venture capital. But what I did more than anything else in that span of experience, by the way, I think of life as a book where we write different chapters. And I always advise people, don't be afraid of new chapters. You may have the same characters in your book, your mom, your dad, your brother Jim, etc., your family. You really want to make sure that you try different chapters. And for me, an incredible chapter was being a lawyer. And I was working for big deal companies, doing their smaller deals like InvestCorp, etc. And man, did I learn from them. One of the lessons I learned is when they bought a company, they had an end game. They realized when they were buying it, who they would sell it to. I sound like a Stephen Covey man, but that book was really true. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Begin with the end in mind.
Absolutely. And you know what? I learned that people, when they're working for you, compensation is important, but not half as important as respect. You know, I tell my students at Cornell, I teach a course at Cornell, and I tell my students, you know, it's amazing. I've never had anybody call me a name or give me a dirty look for holding the door for them or for saying please or thank you. You know, what we all want, everybody, we see a lot of people on TV these days, and I don't want to comment on that in any way, but we want respect. We all want respect. And so we all have to understand that's very, very important. I also learned from operators that pennies count, Lonnie. I love people saying, well, we got a big balance sheet. We can hire that corporate jet. We can build that real estate monument to our business. Those pennies count. And make sure that you realize that you got to have cash as the fuel of a growing business. So I learned lessons like that were really, really important. And lastly, I learned doing a business is sort of like steering a ship. It's that wheel. You make small decisions a lot. You avoid the big decisions. Because if your wheel is, you slightly correct it, you can steer that ship. But when it gets out of control, so you got to be a decision maker every day and make those small decisions. Very, very important.
That's fantastic. So key lessons: begin with the end in mind. You said pennies count, right?
Yes.
Count every penny. More of us are probably doing that now than ever, which is probably a good discipline to learn, which you sometimes only learn when you're in the financial adversity phase of a business. And then make many small good decisions
and
course corrections rather than wait for the big
build teams to respect each other. Everything is teamwork. Awesome. None of us achieve anything without the help of God and as well as our fellow team members and family members. And that's the way it is, period, in my opinion.
Yeah, relying on others. Sometimes when we're not in adversity, we tend to rely on ourselves more than it's probably healthy for us. And right now, one of the benefits of the adversity many of us are facing is it's helping us to rely on others and maybe on God. You know, sometimes that's not all bad, right?
No,
that's good. So, Kevin, you've been involved in the entrepreneurial investment world for several decades now. No comment on your seasoned nature, but you've got a lot of experience and you've seen a lot. You've learned a lot from that process. Can you share some of the key lessons that you've learned from your experience in the entrepreneurial investment world, both positive and negative lessons? And then I'm going to ask you the follow-on question after sharing those lessons of which of those lessons you think apply to our post-COVID world and which might need to be reframed a bit for the future. So start out with the lessons that you've learned.
One of the most important lessons is to study the past and understand scholars. I collect quotes and I love to learn from the past. And one of the people that I've learned from immensely is Charles Darwin. Basically, his expression is very simple. It is not the most intelligent of species that survive. It's not the strongest of species that survive, et cetera, et cetera. It is those species who adapt to change. Adapting, you just referred to it with respect to coronavirus. We're adapting every day. And those who adapt, Lonnie, and make sure that they realize that it's a constant process. You're constantly, every day is sort of a new day. And in business, you've got to realize that you've got to keep adapting to your learning and to your environment. Another quality I learned is that every early stage business, and I've had a lot of early stage businesses, has to have a CPO. What's a CPO? And I think one person in one audience got it, but no one's ever gets it. Lonnie, what's a CPO?
I don't get it.
Chief Passion Officer. Chief Passion Officer.
Passion. Got it.
24/7, the crazy. Inside guy, outside guy, two different people. Good manager is not necessarily a good leader, and a good leader is not necessarily a good manager. But that early stage business has to have that crazy guy. You know, SoBe, I was one of the founders. Many of my companies, I was one of the founders. John Bello, he was the crazy. I was the wise lizard. He was the king lizard. He would walk around with a SoBe sign on the back, running through airports. I distance myself sometimes. The bottom line is you only need one of them, though. You don't want to have two or three. Three destroys your business, okay? Next point, pay attention to the pillow partners. Who are the pillow partners? The spouses. When that entrepreneur gets home at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night, what that spouse says about what it's like to be home. Great, you were there. We got equity in that company. Go for it. That's good. What are you doing working at that place? Why are you there? I don't even like that guy. They make or break your business. Next point. I tell my students at Cornell, okay, all over the world. I teach entrepreneurs all over the world. I say, if you're going to live in Spain for the next 30 years, you better learn Spanish, right? If you're going to be in business for the next 30 years or whatever, you better learn accounting. Because if you don't learn accounting, I guarantee you, at some point in time, people are going to be taking money from you and you don't even know it. These are the type of lessons, okay? And by the way, there are many entrepreneurs who fear success. I've seen wonderful people who are building a business and about to sell and they get panicked. You know, they just don't understand what it is to cross that hump. So often I do like to see people that have at least somebody in their group who has had success before, because there are patterns to success. So it's very, very important. I tell my son, echoes from the marketplace. The consumer will tell you what they want. Listen, 2 ears, 1 mouth. My son is in the cold brew coffee business. Son, survey your customer. Learn from your customer. Learn, constantly ask questions. Those are the type of lessons I've learned.
That was a whole MBA course from a practical standpoint.
I've been around a long time, Lonnie. I got a lot in this brain because I've been around a long time. I'm seasoned. Remember, I'm seasoned.
Yeah, so good. Just a quick question.
Sure.
You mentioned one thing that I don't hear people talk about very much. And, a lot of the people who are listening to this are families in business. And you just mentioned paying attention to the pillow partner.
Yes.
What do you look for in doing that? Tell us a bit about that. I'm looking for some insights that might help, because I know in my case, my pillow partner, my spouse of 37 years, has been super valuable in my business journey, my entrepreneurial journey, and of course, in our family leadership process. And that's vital. What do you look for? What advice do you give if there's not a good relationship with the pillow partner?
Remember that passion I talked about?
Yeah.
My pillow partner has the same passion, similar passion. It's not just strategic. It's not just financial. It's not just the black and white. It's the passion to do well and to make sure that you do something very special and make a difference. You have to have people that have that passion. Passion is a 24/7 light that stays on all the time. Lots of people don't have it. I'm involved in a sport business, a boxing business, because I loved boxing as a kid. And I said to my partner, I said, if we can't have an investor who's a strategic investor, we're not going to have a financial investor. We have to have a passion investor. You got to share that passion. It's really, really important. And by the way, I say send the turkey at Thanksgiving. And at that softball game in the summertime, spend more time with the spouses and the partners. They need to be on board, and you need to direct your attention to them. And you see those employees every day, but you don't see those spouses and those partners and those pillow partners. So make sure you're into their families. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to memorize every child's name, but show that you care. Hey, I understand that you want to go on to college. Tell me about that. People want that touch. They want that respect. They want you to care about them. We all want people to care about us. I know this sounds, goody-goody. It's not. It's fundamentals all over the world.
Yeah.
There's a very wealthy guy in Singapore. Okay, he's very well known in Singapore. But the most important thing is his fourth child, when she was going to NYU, she had my phone number in case of emergency. That's what they're all about. Relationships, sharing family, and understanding and trusting.
What I love about hearing you talk about that is it's not just a management gimmick or technique.
No.
This flows out of who Kevin McGovern is at your heart. Totally. You actually do care about people, and people can tell that.
Yep.
That's a sign of a
We're all
great
children
leader.
of God, Lonnie. We're all children of God. I don't care how wealthy or poor you are. You're a child of God.
Yep.
Period.
Doesn't matter what race, gender, nationality, or socioeconomic status. People are people, and they deserve to be loved, right? It's a heart condition. It's not just actions. It's like, what do we think and feel? And ultimately, in business and in family, people follow people that they know genuinely love and care about them.
Totally.
Right? So thank you for being a great role model of that. Okay, so you listed 6 or 7 key lessons that you've learned from working with hundreds of different startups and succeeded businesses that didn't succeed, watching the patterns from that. So now the key question is, which of those entrepreneurial lessons that you've learned do you think will most help in the post-COVID-19 world? And which of these might need to be reframed for the future?
Well, clearly we have the issue of adaptation. We've got to be adapting to our environment. So what we've done as McGovern Capital is we've concentrated in certain areas. One of my other mottos is I say I'm a disciple of one of the great philosophers of the 20th century. And they say, oh, really? Who's that? I said, Wayne Gretzky. They say, Wayne Gretzky? Skate to where the puck will be. Today, you don't address the issue necessarily today. You address the issue that will continue for a period of time while you ramp up. So we're spending a lot of time in healthcare, okay? We're spending a lot of time in alternates, whether consumer products or energy. We're spending a lot of time in sports and entertainment because you want to know something? What you love, the old expression, everybody's heard it, do what you love to do and you never work a day of your life. I happen to love sports. We're in esports. We're involved in an impact network with boxing and other events. I love sports. We love sports. And so we're very much involved. So do what you love to do. And probably the most important word nowadays is find what's effective and implement it. Okay. I say to people, good ideas, great. At Thanksgiving, my kids will say, Dad, I got a great idea. And I say, I'll look at it when you give me the 2 to 5 page business plan of how to go to market. They say, what are you talking about? I say, the old expression, good idea without execution, hallucination. Okay. Everything. So, and my passion is clean water. And so when Elon Musk put those filters in Flint, those are our filters. I'm really proud of that. And we're working to this day on filters. We're working on vascular diseases in both humans and in plants, believe it or not, 2 separate companies. We're working on removal of plaque from your blood system with a drug that we're working on. I'm on the board. And I think it's going to be the most game-changing drug, totally. And we're working in the plant world as well. I don't know how many companies now, 24 companies or whatever, but all of them are trying to make a difference in different categories, plastics to fuel, plant-based foods, et cetera, et cetera. My son is one of the founders of Rise Cold Brew Coffee, which is an alternate. It's a wonderful category. He's doing exceedingly well. And I think he's learned some lessons from me, and he's implementing some of those as well. But we're doing things that make a difference, and I continue to do those things. One of the things that I'm really spending a good amount of time on is home health care, remote patient monitoring, talking to those companies that want to be leaders in that category. I think the emergency room, to some extent, I don't mean to any way affect the courageous health workers, is going to be displaced by good home health care. We need to follow people at home with chronic issues as well as everyday issues, particularly in the multicultural world. I think that's really, really important. And we're spending time working on that. Okay. So we try to be futuristic, skate to where the puck will be, make a difference, and be disruptive. And we also have a lot of international experience. So we're looking at things that can be globally upscaled and rolled out to other places where we can apply it to people all over the world on every level of economic status. So we're doing a lot of crazy things, and forgive me for rambling, but you got to make a difference. Why are you here? One of my favorite quotes, Lonnie, is Mark Twain. I love this one. He says, what are the 2 most important days of your life? The day you're born and the day you figure out why. Wow. I love that.
That's so good.
For me, it's clean water. I mean, I have this passion.
That's fantastic.
I love what I do.
Yeah, I can tell what's inspiring, I think, to anybody who's around you.
I love to disrupt things. I'm a little bit of a, out of the box and all those crazy expressions. I've always been a bit of a disruptor. God bless my parents, put up with my misbehavior as a kid, because, all these family pictures is this dumb kid with his mug on destroying the pictures. I've always been a little bit of the, when I go on a panel, I like to disagree with somebody, not because I want to disagree, but I like to get the action going. You know what I mean? So I'm a disruptor by nature, and I like companies that are going to change the pattern of that industry. Okay.
That's so good. So Kevin, you started out by saying one of the lessons that you've learned from the past that you're applying now is adapt, skate to where the puck is going to be. So I have a follow-up question on that. Kevin, how do you know where the puck is going to be in this environment? I mean, in prior times, pre-COVID, it was a little bit easier to say, the ice is always smooth and level and flat. The goals are kind of in the same place. We played this game before. We can kind of predict where the puck's going to be. There's new rules, maybe. There's a new set of dynamics on the ice right now. So the question is, what metrics do you use? What things do you look at? What filters do you look through to inform your gut and your mind about where the puck's going to be in this environment?
Probably a favorite word. I work a lot with scientists. I was co-chair of science as a trustee committee, because I love hanging out with scientists in sports as well as in biological, et cetera. They love the word, Lonnie. They love the word iterate. The word iterate means take information from different places, different perspectives, and then form your own line. Okay. And so I really try to iterate when I'm thinking about what's going on. Sometimes I'll look at a deal, and I'll say, okay, how do I know whether this is a trend versus a fad? I don't want a fad. I don't want to deal with fads. Okay. I'll go to experts in the industry from different perspectives, and I'll iterate from them. The same with today. Keep learning what's going on. I talk to medical people every day. I spoke to an executive from Northwell this morning. I speak to different people in New York City, in Dallas, and in Bangkok as much as I can. I keep in touch with my good friends around the world, but we try to iterate, okay? And in so iterating, we build patterns. And life is, to some extent, not all, it's what AI does a lot better than I'll ever do. It's that deep learning, okay? We iterate and we learn patterns and we form, probabilities from patterns, Lonnie. None of us can see around the corner totally. But I heard this morning, whether it's right or not, I was told by a real scholar in this area that, they were the epicenter, 30% chance the virus is waning a little bit. That doesn't mean it is. I'm not saying that. But I'm going to follow through with that a little bit and learn from that. So you're constantly iterating. You're constantly getting information from different people, and you're forming a conclusion. And so I'm constantly talking to people, and I'm constantly talking to various people on different levels. That cab driver in D.C., I'll learn more about politics than the cab driver in D.C., et cetera, et cetera. You know what I'm saying. Iterate, iterate.
Yeah, that's so good. So again, you've developed that pattern of being a lifelong learner way prior to this time. It's served you well. And if anything, this crisis has accelerated that pattern in your life, right?
Totally.
You're trying to learn even more, like many of us are. So that's a tremendous...
Clean water, Lonnie. Srini used to run Office Depot of India. He says, I'm in Mumbai. And he says, let's get a driver to take you around to the different slums. I said, no, we're walking them. We're taking a taxi each trip. You want to feel it. I tell people, walk some slums. Walk with kings and walk with slums. Walk Dharavi in Mumbai. Walk Pachacútec in Peru. You get perspective. You're iterating in your life. See the poor, see the rich, see the middle class. Learn, learn, learn. But, feel it. You build passion that way, okay? You really don't build passion by just, looking at a movie about somebody. Sit down and talk to them, right? You know what I'm talking about.
Yep, so good, Kevin. So, Kevin, you mentioned your son earlier and that you're doing business with your son. I kind of wish I was your son so that I could get the benefit of this kind of wisdom all the time.
My son's not always happy with me, but I love him to pieces and he loves me.
I know. I said that partly hoping that he listens to this and realizes how fortunate he is. But tell us a bit about your experience in working with family and business. Because again, we have many in our audience who are in that situation. What are some key lessons you've learned as a parent? What are some lessons you've learned about doing business with family?
First of all, I want to put out a salute to my son, who's one of the 4 founders, 3 of his buddies from prep school, and he started Rise Cold Brew Coffee. He's a foodie. He said 5 years ago to me, Dad, I want to branch out. I want to start this cold brew coffee company. I said, what's cold brew? What the hell is it? He says, well, let me explain it to you and blah, blah, blah. Well, he's doing exceedingly well. And, when you have your kids, you got to learn what they want to do. He's a foodie. It was a mistake for me to put him into some techie companies, although food requires some tech. But him in a foodie and food and beverage company, off like a rocket. Put him in a data computing company, not necessarily. And so you got to learn, put your kids in a situation that they will really enjoy doing it every day, and they'll excel in it. However, it's different being a parent and working with somebody. When you're working with somebody, you want to respect them. You want to see what their interests are, but you don't expect too much pushback when you say, we got to get this done by Friday. Okay. When you have a son or a relative working for you, the pushback's very different, Lonnie. Well, I'll try to get it done by Friday, Dad, but we have that picnic on Saturday and I got to prepare for that too. So there's pleasure and there's pain. And anybody who has close relatives, whether it's sons, daughters, whatever, working for them knows what I mean. I talk about it all the time. There's a pleasure that I spend more time with my son or daughter, and there's also the pain because it works both ways, okay? And so I tell people that's really learning. My son, when he first came on with me 100 years ago, he says to me, he says, Dad, I really want to be with you with the action. I said, son, we're constantly looking at deals. We need to do due diligence all the time. You got to be doing research. I'll never forget what he responded, and I'm sure he'll smile today. He said, Dad, I don't like to do research. I want to be at the table when you're doing the deal. I want to be there at that moment. I said, well, buddy, that's about 2% of the time. I said the other 98% of the time is hard work and, doing your due diligence. But he learned, and I'm sure today he's smiling about it. And by the way, I am going to proudly tell you that about 4 years ago, my son took me out to dinner, and he said, Dad, I want you to be my best man. I said, buddy, you're in the Hall of Fame of your prep school for lacrosse. You played at Cornell lacrosse. Get one of your buddies to be best man, please. I understand. He says, no, you don't understand. You are my best man. And I said, top 5. one of the 5 most important things that has ever happened to me. And my daughter Ash has said to me several times, Dad, I need your advice. And I say it again. She said, what are you talking about? I need your advice. I said, no. Say those words again. Okay. So look, it's different business and family. Okay. But, respect, communications, keeping the lines open, all of those are fundamentally the same. But there is rules of conduct different in business than there are in family. No doubt about it.
So do you talk about that with your son, specifically saying things like, okay, now we're in the business relationship mode? Or
I
do you
did, less
differentiate?
so now. But, we've had those conversations. But, now he's telling me about his business, and I'm proud of him. And quite frankly, I'm a reasonably successful guy, and there's nothing better than to see your children branch out in their own thing and get out of your shadow.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
Some kids, they should be right there helping you grow your business, et cetera. And some kids need to be out of that, that successful guy's shadow or gal and doing their own thing. And, they're heads of families. They need to have the independence, the pride, the respect, the judgment to run a family, not just a business. And you want to see them develop those skills outside of the box of your company. Your company's not the end game. Your family's the end game, and their happiness.
I think what you just said is the key that I've found, is realizing that with family and business isn't the end game. It's the relationships in business. And when I have family in business, it's the relationships with family. So relationships are really the end game, right? And everything else flows from that. So
Lonnie,
love your philosophy.
I tell everybody I meet in business, one of the lessons I've learned, and you just said it more astutely than I can say it, is in real estate, and real estate a lot better than I'll ever know real estate, it's location, 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 or something like that. You could talk an hour and a half on that one, okay? You know what I tell them in business, particularly international business? Relationships, relationships, relationships. Everything is counting on trust. What are you going to do, sue somebody in China? Yeah.
Yeah, right. Nope. Kevin, you just mentioned real estate. I can't resist, since a lot of our focus is on real estate investments. I have to ask you a question about real estate investments. And I know real estate hasn't been your primary wealth creation focus, but it seems that anyone who creates wealth from any method ultimately has some real estate in a diversified investment.
It's part of our portfolio, no doubt about it. Totally.
Right. So what are the types of real estate investments that you find attractive? And what categories do you see as winners and losers in the economy that we're entering into now?
Just had a conversation with my daughter 2 days ago and her spouse, Vic. And this is my thoughts, Lonnie. I'd rather listen to you, but if you want me to just throw it out, here's the deal. Multifamily, our investments now are in multifamily and second-tier cities. I'm very happy with them, okay? And I think they will still prosper. I really think that the commercial world, you tell me, Lonnie, is going to suffer. I think we're going to have that adjustment to office condos and more individuality, just like I see in 08, 09, we had a run to sharing, Airbnb, Uber, etc. I think we're going to have a run to privacy, okay? A run to individualism, all right? And real estate will reflect that. I have a place, one of our places is in a high-rise building in New York, where the top 2 floors, blah, 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 okay? I think those high-rises, at least for the next 2 to 3 years, are going to suffer from a valuation standpoint. That's my humble opinion. And I think your multifamily will be more desirable. I'll tell you another real estate aspect that I think is exceedingly important is home office, okay? Now, I think, in early February, I gave a talk as a keynote in Saudi Arabia, King Abdullah Economic City. And I used this slide several times over the last 2 years. And it's a picture of the Jetsons at home. Forgive me, but it's worth it. And I put on the top of it food, energy, and water. And I said, in the future, we will grow it, prepare it, consume it, and dispose of it in our homes. The future's now, Lonnie. Add healthcare, add entertainment, and whatever else you want to add. The future is now. When you're looking at a house or a residence, one of the more important rooms you're going to be looking for now is a home office. You want to have a nice kitchen, nice den, at least 1 bedroom or whatever. And my family will tell me a lot more. My wife will tell me a lot more about what it is, et cetera. The bottom line is that home office facility is going to now be a premium. And those real estate developers who provide for that with, technology will be winners. That's my opinion.
That's fantastic. And by the way, for those of you listening, I didn't pay Kevin to plug multifamily real estate investments.
You did the way
Didn't
it
know you
is.
were going to do that, but obviously that's what our belief is too, that that's one of the best places for investments right now, and typically has been much more resilient during recessionary times historically. And for many reasons, from talking to a lot of different people, learning a lot, like you mentioned earlier, I think through this time it's going to fare better also. And
At least in the
just
short term. In the long term, who the heck knows? But in the short term, Lonnie, next 2 to 4 years.
Yep, that's fantastic. So for you, why secondary markets? I'm just curious why, because you mentioned multifamily and secondary markets.
I think I learned from 08, 09. I may need to learn more. They were the least affected, in my opinion. I think Salt Lake, Seattle, Sioux Falls, Idaho, those cities, they have housing needs, whether we're going through or this or that or this, we've had pandemics, the 08, 09 was a pandemic economically. Okay. We had
Right.
health pandemics. We have this, we have that. Some places are just a little bit more insulated. And I think the bigger cities, I really am terribly trod by New York City right now. I think they get impacted a little bit more, although New York weathered 08, 09 fairly well. I just think the second tier cities are more stable in terms of a longer term investment. That's all. Austin,
Yeah,
Texas.
we've done a lot in secondary cities for similar reasons also. So,
And also that
yeah,
have diversity of people, some college students, good trades, good economies, et cetera, et cetera. Although I will tell you, we have one or two investments in school housing. Let me tell you about education. I'm worried about education. I'm very active at Cornell, and we have a wonderful, wonderful administration there. But, online education is really going to displace a lot of different situations. I'm not telling you the major universities, but the smaller universities are in trouble. And I don't want them to be in trouble, but they are. And there's another trend that a very famous guy that I like to listen to anytime, any place, Tom Friedman, was talking about. More corporations are now training their people internally and saying, don't get the MBA, don't get the graduate degree. We'll train you and we'll make you specific to what your needs are. I also think that there's going to be more trade certificates. I've been pushing some networks, et cetera. Think about how you can train people who are out of work now to learn some skills. They don't necessarily need a Bachelor of Arts or Bachelor of Science, but they need some skills, and they may not be able to go to these courses that are costing them thousands of dollars. Maybe there's ways of deploying them on TV with proper sponsorships and ads to educate the masses and get them back up to speed to some extent. I know that's a bold thought. But by the way, I don't mind bold thoughts. I like bold thoughts because, again, if you just can take a couple steps in that ladder, you never know where it's going to go. So I think we need to now re-educate. I'm not telling you anything. You know this. We need to re-educate our masses more than ever. With coronavirus, it's now created more emphasis on that than ever. And we better do it. We better be proactive. If we're not training and teaching people, they're going to train and teach us ways that we don't like.
Tell us a bit more about what your vision is or your expectations for the new normal, kind of the 2.0 economy or whatever you want to call it. What are some of the most opportunistic areas for investment? Talk to us more about your view on that.
I will tell you one negative, then we'll go on to positives. The headlines over the next 2 years, I love alliterations, I think they called it. It's China, coronavirus, and currencies, okay? Détente with China is over, okay? 45 years of them doing all sorts of soft products, as Tom Friedman calls it, and us doing the deep products. They become technologically. I'm not going to comment how they got there, et cetera. I think détente with China is now going to be more of a Cold War. I hope not, but I think it will be. The era of self-sufficiency is going to be more than ever. We're going to go back into our borders. That détente created globalization, created prosperity and stability around the world. I think now we're going to have provincialism, individualism, and the developed countries are going to be taking care of themselves, much more worrying about the rest of the world. I think the developing countries are going to suffer tremendously because they rely on the US dollar, but their currencies are going to be devalued tremendously. That's going to be a big problem for us around the world. And that will have impact on climate change. You know what? The more you hear about climate change, the more it's daunting. But we'll talk about that some other time. But it will definitely have an impact. What's in the vision that I can deal with a little bit? Healthcare, man. Wow. As I said, I have to repeat, home healthcare, clean water. We've lost sight of the fact that 80% of hospital beds in the outside world, third-party world, are from people with waterborne diseases. 80% of the children under 5 is the people that die from waterborne diseases. Another issue that we're working on and spending time on, you're going to be surprised maybe, Hearing. About under 20 is about a 20% hearing loss. Kids are listening to music. They're listening to this. They got earbuds, and hear this. It's affecting our senses. Hearing is a big issue. I've joined forces with a clear entrepreneur in this area who not only has IP, but tremendous ideas about devices for your glasses, et cetera, to help, contain the environmental noise impact and damage to not only your hearing, but your brain. Huge trend. The senses are going to be impacted in so many different ways. And we need to be looking at our eyes, our ears, our senses. But we're looking very closely at hearing and spending a lot of time there and putting our energies in that area. We think that's a huge area. You may say, well, it may not change the world. It's a big problem. It's a big, big problem. So those are just examples of things that home office, powering e-commerce, payment processing, huge. In some ways, the globe will be flatter. Tom Friedman, thank you. And in some ways, it'll be provincial. E-commerce, flatter. Health, a vaccine, if it's discovered in India, we're going to need it all over the world. So we're going to see flattening, and we're going to see provincialism at the same time. It's going to be a recipe for a little bit of discordance. But that's what I'm saying. When you get old, you see patterns. Remember those patterns I talked about before? And talking to people, I see those patterns developing right now. And those patterns are going to carry forward for the next 2, 4, 5, 6 years, whatever.
It's interesting. I know, Kevin, you've done business in something like over 80 countries, right? And negotiated
I haven't
deals
visited all of them, about half of them. Go ahead. At least half of them.
So very global perspective. And I appreciate you sharing some of that. And particularly in this scenario where now we have, for the first time ever, a crisis that has same cause that's affecting the entire world. So can you talk a bit more about what you see as the changes to business in the future as a result of that dynamic?
First of all, this Zoom call is a perfect example of the tremendous changes that we're seeing. We're living on Zoom now, okay? Our relationships and our communications are instantaneous now, for better and for worse. We all know that, Arab Spring was started on a phone, et cetera. Business is going to be so fast and so furious. But you will see issues of transportation like we've never seen before, okay? We're going to be dealing with our consumers. Each country is going to have to deal with their consumer in a more direct way and rely less on what's outside their borders, okay? I also think somehow, sooner or later, the language issue will change. 80 countries, 800 languages. That's got to change. And I think that digital will change that. My prediction longer term is we're going to develop some digital language that we all can share. I think that's just inevitable. EU had a great goal, 50, 60 years ago of doing that over time, and they found it really, really difficult. And every day in our homes, we'll still be speaking our languages, but we're going to have a digital language, and that's going to come. And we'll have a business language that will be more digital, and this way we can express to each other more clearly. Supply chain will change dramatically. You know how the supply chain is broken up into so many different segments now. Right now, just all the registrations that we got to go through. We're importing some stuff from Thailand. It's taken us enormous amount of time with the registration process. That will change. I tell my students, I say, look for the ease of doing business index each year as it changes, because that is going to be an important index. And you should be looking at that before you talk about doing global business. Make sure you understand how difficult or how easy it is to do business in that country, because some countries that you think should be really easy are much more difficult. But we're going to see trade transcending borders. I can buy something on Alibaba tomorrow, right? That's 5 years from now, we're going to laugh that we were so segmented. Yeah. I see another thing, and forgive me, and this is not the best, but I see it. Lonnie, we're going to be wearing bio badges. When I want to go in a hotel, I'm going to have a red badge, a green badge, and maybe a yellow badge. And tonight, red badges are not permitted in the restaurant tonight. I'm sorry, but I think that will happen. I think you'll have segmentations in society that we haven't envisioned before. Right now, there's something to be said, and I'm not for it. There's something to be said. Send the millennials back to work. Keep the gray waves home. And you know that that's a subtle thought in our economy right now. I think there will be identification by some sort of visual. I don't know what it is, a chip inside of you, whatever, that's going to segment out your society. And that scares the heck out of me. Okay. We're seeing privacy.
I was going to say, are you excited about that?
I'm not, but I want to be part of it. I work with Consumer Reports. One of the charities that I work with that you didn't mention was Consumer Reports. I think the CEO she's amazing, Marta. And I'm working with their digital lab and working on privacy. They was some of the people who exposed the issues of Zoom and privacy, Consumer Reports. Okay. I think that's going to be key.
Yeah.
How do you and I talk without 100,000 people being able to access our conversation? That is going to be a huge problem. My dear friend Jim Anolfo, who used to be CIO of the New York Police Department, I shouldn't mention his name. He said, Kevin, we can access every camera in New York. Every camera. That means this camera right here. That means the camera in my hallway in my apartment building. That means et cetera, et cetera. Privacy, we're going to need privacy in some sectors, but digitally, going to be almost impossible. And we need to find ways of doing that in cybersecurity, privacy, et cetera.
So Kevin, I just have to say, I love your ability to see the big picture, see things that are coming on the horizon, and even things that you're talking about now that you're not excited about, that you have the drive, the energy to engage and trying to find a way to make that better. Curiosity.
Lonnie,
to engage in that and try and how can we all, that's the question. There's a lot that's happened we don't like. There's things that might happen we don't like. But how can we engage with that so that we can make that outcome better somehow for society? And that's the passion you have. So I just have to ask you to wrap up here. What motivates you, Kevin, to keep going the way you do? I mean, personally and business and spiritually and everything. What drives you? Because I want to be like you.
I tell people that the more you learn, the more you're curious, the younger you are. I disagree and agree with Warren Buffett on a lot of things. He's a lot smarter than me. But one thing I learned from one of his interviews is he said, I read. And the interviewer said, Mr. Buffett, if there was 27 hours in a day, what would you do with the extra 3 hours? He said, I read more. I got to tell you something. I watch certain reality shows just for, release. But tell you the truth, I want to learn all the time. This is such a beautiful, amazing world of learning. I mean, it's just, you get involved with hearing. I want to learn more about hearing issues. I'm involved in Impact Network. I want to learn more about media. I want to learn more about, what's going on in boxing or whatever sport, esports. I went to Barclays Arena. I'm an investor in a team, and I went to Barclays Arena for the championships of Overwatch. I was the oldest guy in the entire place. But you know what? I learned watching these kids. I really, really enjoyed that afternoon. And, I didn't care what they thought of me or what's this old fogey doing here. I wanted to see what they're doing. And you know what? They had their screens open. They're participating. They're getting excited. They're getting passion. I decided I need to invest even more in esports, and I did. Okay? By 2022, viewership of esports will be number 2 to only the NFL in the United States. It's amazing. Wow. These kids, they want to be on esports. We want to be on the reality shows or whatever. Not necessarily you, Lonnie, but you know what I mean. So learn what they're doing and learn their patterns. Learn what's important to them and sit with them.
Okay, so I'm going to wrap up with this question because we're out of time, but you triggered a thought in my mind that I would love to just find a bit more nuggets of wisdom from you on. So here's the question. If you could step back in time when you were just getting started on your family and your career, and if you could give your 20-something-year-old self advice based on your lifetime of experience and your understanding of the world that we live in today, the question is, what would you say if your 20-something-year-old self was standing in front of you right now?
Mm-hmm. Learn to communicate in every way. Visit with people as much as you can and sell something. Do some sales early in life. Communication is everything. Lonnie, you're a great communicator. The reason I related so quickly with you is you're just easy to communicate with. People just lose that, whether I'm on the Zoom or not. Communicating with each other is those who can communicate typically win. Sell something. As a kid, I sold encyclopedias, magazines, termite protection, you name it, I sold it. But it taught me people. And when I meet a person, I can sort of size them up a little faster. I was a deals lawyer, so I was a negotiator. Communicate. Learn to communicate. People say, I don't care about English, I just care about science. Well, I said that you'll never rise up because you better be communicating your science. When I meet a scientist, I say, tell me what you're up to in 3 or 4 sentences and no more. And when people can communicate to you, that's when they can win. And I think that's what we need more is respect, but we need as a skill to communicate better. I know that's very general, but it's very, very true.
The basics are sometimes most powerful if we pay attention to them.
Fundamentals,
Thank
man.
you for sharing.
Fundamentals.
Yep.
Thank you, God.
So Kevin, I wish I had all day to continue talking with you, and I will at a future
I'll see you
lunch
soon.
or dinner with you, I'm sure. But thank you so much for sharing so many gems of wisdom from your super deep experience and giving us all the benefit of hearing how you're in the process of applying all that experience to the new world that we live in today. Very rich. Thank you.
Thank you.
We certainly live in unprecedented time of challenge and corresponding opportunity. And in the midst of all of that, I wish you all much success at, to use Kevin's phrase here, finding and catching your own current and making your own wave that will make a positive difference now and for generations to come.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Systems for Success, where the mystery of success is solved in the magic of the system. To ask us questions you'd like us to address in future episodes, go to systemsforsuccess.com. See you next time.